The low hum of conversation feels like a physical presence, a thick, warm blanket woven from expensive perfume, seared scallops, and quiet, confident laughter. The light is golden and low, catching the crystal of a wine glass, the edge of a silver fork. For a moment, I am just a woman standing in the doorway of a private dining room, a ghost at the feast. Then his eyes find mine.
Mark.
My husband. He freezes. The smile he was giving the silver-haired man beside him doesn't just vanish, it shatters. The warmth drains from his face, leaving behind a waxy, pale mask. His fork, halfway to his mouth, hovers in the air, a tiny silver satellite stuck in orbit. The woman next to him, the one with her hand resting possessively on his forearm, her laugh a little too loud, a little too bright, she feels the shift. Her name is Isabella. I know this. I know everything. Her head turns, following his gaze, and her perfectly painted smile begins to curdle. The entire room seems to fall silent, a held breath. The clink of cutlery stops. The murmur of voices fades into a ringing in my ears. They all look at me, then at Mark, then at the two distinguished gentlemen rising from their seats to greet me. The investors. His investors. Or, at least, he thought they were his. The air in that room was so thick, you could taste the betrayal. If you've ever felt that chill run down your spine, the one that tells you everything has changed forever, tell me about it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're new here, subscribing helps me share more stories like this. Just 6 months ago, this silence, this tension, would have been unimaginable. Our life was loud. It was filled with the sounds of construction, not of a house, but of a dream. Mark's dream, which had long ago become ours. Our small apartment was a permanent command center. Blueprints and financial projections were our wallpaper. The scent of coffee was constant, a fuel we burned at both ends. I remember nights spent on the floor, surrounded by takeout containers and legal pads, mapping out the future of his tech company, Innovate Dynamics. He would trace the lines of a flowchart with his finger, his eyes alight with a fire that I found intoxicating. He'd look at me, his face tired but electric. "We're going to change the world, Clara," he'd say, and I believed him. I believed in him with a ferocity that bordered on religious. I was an architect. A good one. I'd just made junior partner at my firm when Mark's idea, a brilliant piece of logistic software, started to consume him. He needed to quit his job to go all in. He needed a safety net. So I became that net. I put my own career on a quiet, indefinite hold, taking on freelance drafting work I could do from home. It paid the bills. It kept us afloat while he soared. My own blueprints gathered dust in a portfolio under the bed. My ambitions were folded away like old linens, stored for a future that was always just around the corner. Just until the first round of funding, babe, he'd promise, kissing the top of my head as he rushed out the door. Then you can build anything you want. I'll build you a whole city. I didn't want a city. I just wanted him. This shared struggle. This beautiful, exhausting climb. The first few years were a blur of ramen noodles and small victories. He'd land a minor client, and we'd celebrate with a bottle of cheap champagne, drinking it straight from the bottle on our fire escape, our legs dangling over the city. We were a team. I wasn't just his wife. I was his sounding board, his late-night editor, his unofficial, unpaid co-founder. I helped him refine the user interface. I wrote copy for his first website. I even named the damn company Innovate Dynamics. It sounded strong, forward-thinking. It sounded like him. The cracks started so subtly I mistook them for stress. The company was growing. The pressure was immense. He started staying later at the office, an office that was now a sleek, minimalist space downtown, and no longer our living room. The late-night calls became more frequent, but his voice was different. Lower. Quieter. He'd take them in the other room, closing the door behind him. Investor call. He'd mouth, offering a tight, apologetic smile. Then came the smells. A faint trace of a perfume that wasn't mine, clinging to his shirt when he finally came home. It was a sweet, cloying scent, something expensive and floral. My own perfume was sandalwood and citrus, something earthy and sharp. When I asked, he'd laugh it off. Must have been someone at the networking event. You know how it is, everyone crammed into one room. I didn't know. Or, I thought I did. I chose to believe him, because the alternative was a chasm I wasn't ready to face. The distance grew. He stopped talking to me about the company, about the details. The flowcharts and projections were no longer spread across our floor. They were locked away on his laptop, password protected. When I asked how things were going, the answers became vague. Good. Busy. He was a stranger in his own home, a ghost in our life. He'd come in late, shower immediately, and fall into bed, his back to me. The space between us in that bed felt like a mile-wide canyon, cold and silent. I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of his breathing, and wonder where the man I married had gone. I told myself it was the pressure. The big deal he was chasing, the one that would finally make all our sacrifices worth it, was on the line. He was just focused. That's what I told myself, over and over, a mantra against the rising tide of fear. The world didn't tilt. It shattered. It was a Tuesday. A painfully ordinary Tuesday. Mark was in Boston for a 2-day conference. He'd called me from the airport, his voice rushed. It's back-to-back meetings, babe. I'll probably be off the grid. Don't wait up, I said I loved him. He said, you too, before the line went dead. I was cleaning, a mindless, frantic activity to keep the loneliness at bay. I was gathering laundry, his clothes from the weekend still piled in the hamper. That's when I saw it. Tucked into the pocket of the jeans he'd worn on Sunday was a small, folded piece of paper. A receipt. My heart didn't sink. It just stopped. It wasn't from a bar or a coffee shop. It was from a hotel. The kind of boutique, obscenely expensive hotel in our own city that people use for staycations. Or for other things. The date on the receipt was from 2 weeks prior. A Thursday. A night he'd told me he was pulling an all-nighter at the office to prep for a board meeting. The room charge was astronomical. But it was the second-line item that stole the air from my lungs. Room service. 2 entrees. A bottle of Dom Perignon. My hands started to shake. It could be a business dinner. It could be. He could have taken a client out. But why a hotel room? Why the champagne? My mind was scrambling, desperately trying to build a plausible explanation, a story that would allow me to fold this receipt back up, put it in the trash, and pretend it never existed. Then I saw the email. He'd used my laptop that morning to print his boarding pass, and had forgotten to log out of his personal account. It was open on the screen, a list of messages. My eyes scanned them, not wanting to look, but unable to look away. Most were work-related, but one near the top had a name I didn't recognize. Isabella. The subject line was, "Tonight." My finger trembled as I clicked on it. The message was short. "Can't wait to have you all to myself again. The suite at the Beaumont was incredible. You spoil me. Let's make this Boston trip one for the record books. I've already packed the lingerie you like. Ko isa." The screen went blurry. The letters swam together. I felt a strange, detached sensation, as if I were floating above my own body, watching a scene from a movie. I saw my hand reach out and grip the edge of the desk. I saw my knuckles turn white. The sound in the room was just a low, guttural noise, and I realized it was coming from me. It wasn't a sob. It was the sound of something breaking. The receipt in my other hand felt like a burning coal. The Beaumont. The Dom Perignon. Isabella. The pieces didn't just fall into place. They slammed together with the force of a car crash. The late nights. The secret phone calls. The floral perfume. The distance. It wasn't stress. It wasn't ambition. It was a lie. A whole, intricate, suffocating lie. Our life, the one I had put on hold, the one I had nurtured and protected, was a sham. He wasn't just building a company. He was building a second life, one where I had no part. I sank to the floor, the receipt and the screen glowing in the dim light, and for the first time, I understood that I wasn't on the team anymore. I was just collateral damage. The first 48 hours were a fog of disbelief. I didn't sleep. I didn't eat. I just sat on the couch, staring at the wall. The damning email burned into my memory. Every time my phone buzzed, my stomach would clench, expecting it to be him, calling from Boston, his voice full of false affection. It never was. The silence from him was louder than any confession. When he finally walked through the door 2 days later, he was smiling, holding a cheap, "I love Boston" mug for me as a pathetic peace offering. He looked tired but triumphant. "Deal's looking good," he announced, dropping his bags. "We might have just landed the big one." He tried to kiss me, but I turned my head and his lips met my cheek. He frowned. "What's wrong with you?" My voice was a stranger's, hollow and flat. "How was your trip?" "I told you it was good." "Busy," he started unpacking, avoiding my eyes. "Just meetings, meetings, meetings." "Did you stay at the conference hotel?" I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. He paused. Just for a second. A flicker of something in his eyes. "Panic?" "Yeah, of course. Where else would I stay?" The lie was so easy for him. So smooth. And in that moment, the grief that had been choking me began to curdle into something else. Something cold and hard. I walked to the desk, picked up the hotel receipt from the Beaumont, and held it out. "Then what's this?" The color drained from his face. He looked at the paper, then at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The charismatic, confident entrepreneur vanished, replaced by a cornered, guilty little boy. "Clara. Listen. Who is Isabella?" I whispered, the name tasting like poison. That's when the gaslighting began. It was a masterclass in manipulation. First came the denials. "It's not what you think. She's a consultant." It was a business meeting, then came the minimization. "Okay, something happened. It was a one-time mistake. It meant nothing." I was stressed, the pressure of the deal. He painted himself as the victim of circumstance, a man buckling under a great weight. When I didn't back down, when I stood there, rigid with a pain he refused to acknowledge, his tone shifted. He got angry. He turned it on me. "You know, this is exactly why I can't talk to you anymore. You're always so suspicious. You're trying to sabotage me, right when I'm on the verge of success. After everything I've done for us." He actually said that. Everything I've done for us, as if my sacrificed career, my emotional labor, my unwavering support were nothing. As if I were just a spectator to his grand journey. He made me feel insane, like my discovery was an act of aggression, my pain and inconvenience to his ambition. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I just stood there, letting his words wash over me, each one another layer of ice forming around my heart. He left, slamming the door, claiming he needed space. I collapsed. I spent the next week in a daze, a ghost in my own apartment. I'd pick up my phone to call my mom, then put it down. How could I explain that the life everyone envied was a lie? I felt a profound, suffocating shame. He had not only broken my heart, he had invalidated my entire life for the past 5 years. He had made a fool of me. He would send texts. "Can we please talk about this like adults? I love you. Don't throw everything away over one stupid mistake. The deal is in its final stages. I need you on my side right now." He wasn't apologizing for the betrayal. He was managing a crisis. I was a problem to be solved, a loose end to be tied up so his triumphant narrative could continue uninterrupted. The man I loved didn't exist anymore. Maybe he never had. And as I sat there in the ruins of our life, a tiny, cold thought began to form. He was right about one thing. The deal was in its final stages. And he did need me. He just had no idea how much. The fog of grief began to lift, replaced by a cold, clear anger. It was a clarifying force. I stopped crying. I started thinking. Mark's words echoed in my head. Everything I've done for us, the sheer arrogance of it was breathtaking. He had rewritten our shared history to cast himself as the sole hero. He saw me as a supporting character, a footnote in his biography. He had forgotten who I was before I became his safety net. He had forgotten I was an architect. I don't just design buildings. I understand structure. I know that if a foundation is compromised, the entire edifice will eventually collapse. And I knew our foundation was rotten. I started digging. Not for more evidence of the affair. I had enough of that to last a lifetime, but for leverage. I pulled out the old boxes from under the bed, the ones filled with the early days of Innovate Dynamics. And there it was. The original incorporation documents. My name was on them. Not as a founder, he had been clever about that, but as a witness, a notary, and more importantly, on the initial, small-scale loan agreements we had taken out against our shared assets before he had any real capital. I had co-signed for everything. But that was just the beginning. I kept digging, my mind sharp and focused for the first time in months. I remembered the core of his software, the proprietary logistics algorithm that made it so special. He called it the dynamic core. He always told people the idea came to him in a flash of inspiration. That was a lie. It hadn't come to him in a flash. It had come to him over 6 months of painstaking work, late at night, at our kitchen table. And the person who had helped him map it out, who had helped him solve the key roadblock in the code logic, was me. My background wasn't in software, but architecture is about spatial logic, efficiency, and systems. His problem was a systems problem. I had approached it from a design perspective, sketching out the flow of information like it was the floor plan of a complex building. My old notebooks were filled with these sketches, my handwriting clear and precise, with dates in the margins. I had essentially designed the blueprint for his dynamic core. He had written the code, yes, but I had given him the architecture. And I had the proof. The anger was now a quiet, humming engine inside me. He wasn't just cheating on his wife. He was cheating on his partner, in every sense of the word. He had stolen my contribution, erased my role, and was about to sell it for millions of dollars. My first call was to a lawyer, not a divorce lawyer, a corporate litigator. I found the most ruthless one I could, a woman named Ms. Evans with a reputation for dismantling egomaniacs. I laid everything out on her polished mahogany desk, the loan agreements, my notebooks, the timeline of my involvement. She listened without expression, her eyes scanning the documents. When I was finished, she leaned back in her chair, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. "Mr. Daniels," she said, her voice like gravel and silk, "has made a critical error. He underestimated you." The plan began to form. It wasn't enough to expose him. It wasn't enough to divorce him and take half. He was trying to erase me. I was going to show him and his investors what I had built. Mark, meanwhile, was getting desperate. The investors, a powerful venture capital firm called Sterling Crest, were in the final stages of due diligence. He needed me to play the part of the supportive wife. He came back to the apartment, full of remorse and promises. "It's over with her, Clara. I swear. It was a stupid, meaningless fling. Let's just get through this deal, and we can go to therapy, we can go to Italy, whatever you want." He was a terrible actor. His eyes were shifty, his hands fidgety. He was terrified I would blow up his deal. And he was right to be. I played along. I was quiet, withdrawn, the picture of a wounded wife considering forgiveness. I let him believe he was still in control. "I need time, Mark," I told him, my voice soft. "I can't promise anything." It was the perfect bait. He saw my hesitation not as a warning, but as a negotiation. He thought he could manage me. He had no idea the game was already over. He was just the last one to know. The final piece of the puzzle was the dinner. Mark told me about it, his voice casual, but I could feel the tension radiating off him. "The Sterling Crest partners want to have a final celebratory dinner," he said. "It's mostly a formality before they sign. It's next Thursday. At per se," he paused. "I think it would be really good for them to see you there. To see that we're solid." "I don't know, Mark," I said, looking out the window. "Clara, please," he begged. "This is everything. For us." I let the silence hang in the air for a long moment. "I'll think about it." But I already knew I wouldn't be there. At least, not with him. Ms. Evans had already been at work. She had found out the names of the 2 lead partners at Sterling Crest, a man named Arthur Vance and another named Julian Croft. She had prepared a package. It was concise, professional and devastating. It didn't mention the affair. That was personal and messy. This was business. It included copies of my early design notebooks for the dynamic core, annotated to show their direct correlation to the final software. It included a legal opinion on my intellectual property claim. It concluded with a simple, polite request for a meeting. The email was sent. The trap was set. Mark continued to call and text, trying to convince me to come to the dinner. He even had flowers delivered, a ridiculously large bouquet of roses that felt more like a bribe than an apology. He had no idea that I had already arranged my own dinner with his investors the day before his. The decision was made the moment Ms. Evans smiled that shark-like smile. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclamation. Mark had built his company on my intellectual and emotional labor, then tried to discard me like a piece of old hardware. The thought of him celebrating his victory, his new life built on my erasure, with his mistress at his side, it was unacceptable. The days leading up to the dinner were a strange exercise in duality. To Mark, I was a ghost. I moved through our apartment with a chilling quietness. I answered his questions with monosyllables. I let him see the pain in my eyes, but I kept the fury hidden, banked like a furnace. He interpreted my silence as weakness, my grief as leverage for him. He'd leave in the morning, dressed in his impeccably tailored suits, smelling of ambition and deceit, and I would feel a profound sense of pity for him. He was walking into a storm he couldn't see. My real life happened in hushed phone calls with Ms. Evans and late-night sessions at my laptop, preparing. We didn't just have the notebooks. We had a strategy. Ms. Evans had advised against leading with the affair. It would make me look emotional, vindictive. The key was to present myself as the silent, uncredited partner whose foundational work was the company's single greatest asset and its single greatest liability, if not properly acknowledged. The reply from Sterling Crest came within hours. It was from Arthur Vance himself. It was brief and to the point. Mr. Croft and I would be available to meet tomorrow at 4 p.m. our offices. The night before my meeting with them, Mark came home buzzing with energy. It's happening, Clara. They're getting the final papers drawn up. The dinner tomorrow is just a formality, a handshake. We did it. He grabbed me by the shoulders, his eyes shining. Aren't you happy? I looked at him, at this man who was a complete stranger to me, and I felt nothing. Just a vast, cold emptiness. I need to go out of town tomorrow, I said, my voice even. A family thing. His face fell. The panic was immediate.
What? No.
You can't. The dinner. Clara, you promised you'd think about it. My mind is made up, I said, turning away. He followed me, his voice rising. You're doing this to punish me, aren't you? After everything, you're going to try to ruin this for me. I just looked at him. Ruin it? Mark, you have no idea what I'm capable of. It was the first time I had let the ice in my voice show. He recoiled slightly, a flicker of genuine fear in his eyes. But then his arrogance reasserted itself.
He scoffed.
Don't be so dramatic. What are you going to do? Call them and tell them I had an affair? They're venture capitalists, Clara, not priests. They won't care. He was right. They wouldn't care about the affair. But they would care about intellectual property fraud. They would care about building a 9-figure valuation on a stolen foundation. The next day, I walked into the offices of Sterling Crest. They were what you'd expect: glass, steel, and an unnerving quiet that spoke of immense power. Arthur Vance was in his late 60s, with a mane of silver hair and eyes that had seen everything. Julian Croft was younger, sharper, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than my car. They were polite but guarded. They had me pegged as a disgruntled spouse.
I didn't waste time.
I didn't get emotional. With Ms. Evans at my side, I laid out the facts. I walked them through my notebooks, page by page. I showed them the dated sketches, the logical frameworks. I put them side by side with the technical specs from Mark's own pitch deck. The parallels were undeniable. Mark is a brilliant salesman, I said, my voice calm and steady. He can sell a vision better than anyone I know. But the vision he's selling is built on an architecture I designed. An architecture for which I have received no credit and no equity. I could see the shift in the room. They looked from the notebooks to me, their expressions changing from skepticism to intense focus. Julian Croft leaned forward. Are you saying you have a legal claim to the dynamic core IP? Ms. Evans answered. Her claim is ironclad. We could tie up Innovate Dynamics in litigation for years. By the time it was resolved, your investment would be worthless. The technology would be obsolete. The threat hung in the air, unspoken but absolute. I then played my final card. But I have no interest in destroying the company, I said, looking directly at Vance. I believe in it. I helped build it. I want to see it succeed. But I will not be erased from its story. I proposed a new path forward. A new company, with me at the helm, holding the undisputed rights to the core technology. They could invest in a clean structure with a founder who actually created the IP, not just sold it. Or they could stick with Mark and his house of cards. We left the meeting without a firm answer, but I knew we had won. The look in Arthur Vance's eyes was not one of sympathy. It was the look of a man who has just been shown a much, much better deal. That night, Mark called me, frantic. The dinner has been moved, he said, his voice tight. They changed the venue. A private room at Jean Georges. And they said to bring Isabella. I felt a chill.
Why?
I don't know. They said they wanted to meet the whole core team. Vance was weird on the phone.
Cold.
Something's wrong. You have to be there, Clara. If you're not there. I'm on my way back to the city now, I lied. But I might be late. He didn't know that Vance and Croft had called me an hour earlier. They had agreed to my terms. But they wanted one final piece of theater. We want to see him react, Vance had said, a hint of steel in his voice. We don't invest in liabilities. And we despise frauds. They told me the new time, the new place. And they told me to bring Ms. Evans. The dinner wasn't a celebration for Mark. It was his execution. Mark's paranoia was a frantic, buzzing thing I could feel through the phone. He called me 3 more times as I was getting ready. Where are you? Are you close? Clara, they're asking for you. He was sweating. I could hear it in his voice. He thought my absence was the problem. He thought if I just showed up, the supportive wife, everything would smooth over. He was so focused on the lie of our marriage that he was completely blind to the truth of his business. He had told the investors that Isabella, his mistress, was the company's COO. A brilliant operational mind he'd brought on to scale the business. It was a desperate, last-minute lie to justify her presence in his life, and now he was trapped in it. He was about to introduce his affair to his backers under a false corporate title, hoping the force of his charisma would carry him through. While he was panicking, I was getting dressed. I didn't choose a revenge dress.
I chose armor.
A tailored, severe, dark gray suit. My hair was pulled back in a tight, clean chignon. My makeup was minimal, my expression serene. When I looked in the mirror, I didn't see a heartbroken wife. I saw the CEO of a company that didn't exist yet. I saw the architect of Mark's downfall. Ms. Evans picked me up. She was wearing a blood-red dress. It was a statement. As we drove, she got a text message. She glanced at it and smiled.
They're seated, she said.
Mr. Vance sends his regards. He says the champagne is on ice. The drive to the restaurant was surreal. The city lights blurred past the window. I felt strangely calm. The grief, the anger, the pain of the last few months had been forged into a single point of purpose. I wasn't there to cry or scream. I was there to collect. We didn't go in the main entrance. A manager was waiting for us, and he led us through a quiet side door, down a hushed hallway. He stopped outside a pair of large, dark wood doors. They are inside, he whispered, then vanished. Ms. Evans looked at me. Ready. I took a deep breath. He thought I was the storm he had to weather. He never imagined I was the ocean. She nodded, a glint of admiration in her eyes. Let's go drown him. And that's when we walked in. We are back in that room. The golden light, the frozen faces. Mark, his face a mask of horror. Isabella, her bright, brittle smile cracking like cheap porcelain. And the two investors, Arthur Vance and Julian Croft, rising to their feet. But they are not rising in alarm. They are rising to greet me. Arthur Vance extends a hand, his expression warm, paternal. Clara. So glad you could make it. And Ms. Evans. Please join us. The sound of my name from his lips is the gunshot that finally shatters the silence. Mark flinches, as if he's been physically struck. He looks at me, then at Vance, his mind racing, trying to compute the impossible. He sees me, not in a crumpled heap of tears, but in a power suit. He sees me not alone, but with a lawyer whose reputation precedes her. He sees me being welcomed not as a spouse, but as a principal. Arthur. What is this? Mark stammers, his voice barely a whisper. How do you know my wife? Vance doesn't even look at him. He gestures for us to sit in the two conspicuously empty chairs directly across from Mark and Isabella. We had a very illuminating meeting with Clara this afternoon, he says, his voice casual, but with an edge like a razor. She was kind enough to walk us through some of the company's early design history. Fascinating stuff. Isabella looks at Mark, her eyes wide with confusion and dawning panic. She's a consultant, a COO, she's supposed to be the powerful woman at the table. But in this moment, she is utterly irrelevant, a prop in a drama she doesn't understand. She shrinks in her seat, her hand sliding off Mark's arm. Julian Croft, the younger partner, leans forward, placing his folded hands on the table. He looks directly at Mark. Your wife, Mark, is being modest. She didn't just walk us through the history. It appears she is the history. Mark's face goes from white to a blotchy, sick red. He opens his mouth, but no sound comes out. He looks at me, his eyes pleading, begging me to stop, to rewind time, to make this a nightmare he can wake up from. But my face is a calm, placid lake. I give him nothing. I don't understand. Mark finally chokes out, his voice cracking. This is a misunderstanding.
Clara is.
She's an architect. She doesn't know anything about software. That's where you're wrong, I say, my voice cutting through the tension. It's the first time I've spoken. The sound of it makes him visibly shudder. Architecture is about structure, Mark. It's about building a solid foundation. A concept you seem to have forgotten. I nod to Ms. Evans. She slides a single, leather-bound folder across the table. It stops directly in front of Mark. He stares at it as if it's a venomous snake. Inside that folder, Ms. Evans says, her voice cool and precise, you'll find a summary of Mrs. Daniels' intellectual property claim regarding the dynamic core algorithm. You will also find a term sheet for a new corporate entity. This new entity, which we can call Innovate Architecture for now, will be the sole holder of that IP. Sterling Crest has decided to fund this new entity. The silence that follows is absolute. It is the silence of a guillotine blade held suspended. Mark doesn't open the folder. He can't. His hands are shaking too badly. He is staring at me, his face a canvas of utter devastation. He sees it all now. The game, the trap, the checkmate. He thought he was playing chess, but he was just a pawn on my board. This new entity, Arthur Vance continues, picking up his wine glass, will, of course, need a CEO. Someone with intimate knowledge of the core technology and a clear vision for its future. Clara has graciously accepted the position. Isabella makes a small, choked sound. She pushes her chair back, a look of pure terror on her face. She looks at Mark, the man who promised her the world, and sees him for what he is, a fraud, a shell, a man who has just lost everything. She stands up, mumbling something about the restroom, and practically flees the room. No one watches her go. She is already a ghost. All eyes are on Mark. He looks smaller now, shrunken. The charismatic visionary is gone, replaced by a hollowed-out man. His empire, built on my work and our shared life, has crumbled to dust in the space of 5 minutes. But the company, my team, everything, he whispers, his voice ragged. Your team will be given offers to join the new company, should they wish, Croft says coldly. As for Innovate Dynamics, Without its core IP, it's just an empty shell with a lot of debt. I'd advise you to start calling bankruptcy lawyers. Mark finally looks at me. The hatred in his eyes is pure, undiluted. But beneath it, there is something else. A sliver of pathetic, desperate pleading. He's looking for the woman who loved him, the woman who would have fixed this for him. But she is gone. I buried her months ago. I meet his gaze, and I don't say a word. I just give a small, almost imperceptible nod. A confirmation.
Yes.
I did this. All of it. Vance raises his glass. To new beginnings, he says, looking at me with a respectful smile. And to solid foundations. Croft and Ms. Evans raise their glasses. I raise mine. The clink of crystal sounds like a death knell. Mark just sits there, a statue in the ruins of the life he tried to steal. The gun he had pointed at my future had been turned around, and he had, with perfect, unknowing precision, fired it at himself. The days after the dinner were quiet. Mark disappeared. He didn't call, he didn't text. He simply vanished from the apartment, taking only his clothes. The movers I hired to pack up his remaining things found that I Love Boston mug shattered in the bottom of a wastebasket. I told them to throw the pieces away. There was no shouting match, no dramatic confrontation. His empire and our marriage didn't end with a bang. They ended in a silent, private dining room, with the stroke of a pen on a term sheet. It was cleaner, colder, and far more devastating. Isabella sent me one single email a week later. It just said, "I had no idea. I'm sorry." I don't know if she was sorry for the affair or sorry she had backed the wrong horse. I deleted it without replying. She was a symptom, not the disease. Taking over was a whirlwind. We formed the new company. I hired a brilliant operational lead to be my number 2, and we offered positions to most of Mark's key technical staff. To my surprise, almost all of them accepted. They were loyal to the technology, not the man. They told me they had always wondered about the true origins of the dynamic core, that Mark's explanations were always vague and unsatisfying. It turned out I wasn't the only one he had been lying to. The work is hard. The hours are long. My desk is once again covered in flowcharts and projections. But this time they are mine. My name is on the door. My vision is on the whiteboard. I walk through the halls of my own company, and the quiet hum of activity is the most beautiful sound in the world. It's the sound of my own dream being built, brick by brick. Sometimes, late at night, when the office is empty and the city lights twinkle outside my window, a wave of sadness will wash over me. I don't grieve for Mark, the man who betrayed me. I grieve for the boy I met on a fire escape, the one who shared cheap champagne and impossible dreams with me. I grieve for thus I thought we were. That loss is real. It leaves a scar. But then I look at the blueprints on my screen, at the complex, beautiful architecture of the future I am building for myself, and a different feeling takes over. It's not triumph, not exactly. It's quieter than that. It's a feeling of profound, unshakable peace. A sense of rightness. I didn't just survive. I reclaimed my story. I found the foundation he had tried to bury, and I built my own city on it. He thought my love was a safety net, but he was wrong. It was scaffolding. And when he tried to kick it away, he discovered I was the only thing holding him up. He built his empire on my back, and in the end, that's what gave me the high ground. If this story found you at the right time, I'd love to hear your version. Thanks for being here. Subscribing helps bring more of these to life.